12. Psychological effects of wars on civilians. Wars, they're not just battles on distant shores. They're global upheavals that leave their mark on humanity. But what's often hidden beneath the rubble and headlines are the unseen scars, the shattered hearts and the frayed minds of the civilians caught in the crossfire. It's high time we shine a spotlight on the quiet suffering that wars inflict on everyday people. The mental toll, the emotional wreckage, the psychological aftershocks. These are the stories that rarely make the headlines, but they're stories that need to be told. In this video, we'll delve deep into the psychological effects of wars on civilians. From post-traumatic stress to the resilience that emerges from adversity, we'll uncover the human side of conflict. Get ready to explore the uncharted territory of the human psyche during times of war. Here are the 12 psychological effects of wars on civilians. Watch till the end and subscribe. 1. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. A relentless echo of terrifying memories, anxiety and nightmares persist long after the battle cries have fallen silent. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is like an unending storm of frightening memories, anxiety that never seems to leave, and nightmares that visit, even after the war has ended and the noise of the battles has faded away. Imagine you're in a really scary situation like a war, where you witness or experience terrifying things. Even when that situation is over, the memories of those frightening moments keep coming back, over and over, like an echo that won't stop. These memories can make you feel very anxious, which means you're always worried and nervous about what might happen. And at night, when you try to sleep, you have nightmares, bad and scary dreams that feel so real that they can wake you up in a state of fear and panic. This is what people with PTSD go through. The war might be over, but they are still trapped in the terrifying memories, constant anxiety and haunting nightmares. It's a very challenging and distressing condition that people need help to overcome. 2. Depression and anxiety. The uninvited guests of wars casting long shadows on the mind, filling it with sadness and endless worry. Depression and anxiety are like unwelcome guests that wars bring along, and they cast long, dark shadows on the minds of those affected, filling them with deep sadness and ceaseless worry. Imagine having visitors in your house that you didn't invite or want. In the same way, wars bring these unwanted visitors into the minds of people. Depression is like a heavy cloud of sadness that never seems to go away. It makes you feel very, very unhappy, and it can be really tough to shake off. Anxiety, on the other hand, is a constant feeling of nervousness and worry, like a nagging thought that something bad is about to happen. It's like having a dark cloud of concern hanging over you all the time. Both depression and anxiety are like those dark, unwelcome guests who make themselves at home in your mind, and it's hard to get rid of them. Wars often create the perfect conditions for these guests to stay longer, making life even more challenging for those who experience them. 3. Displacement and homelessness. Homes left behind, communities abandoned, and the chilling unknown of life as homeless refugees. Displacement and homelessness is a situation where people are forced to leave their homes and the communities they've known, and they end up facing the frightening uncertainty of being homeless refugees. Think about your home, the place where you feel safe and where you belong. Now imagine you're suddenly told you have to leave that home. This is what happens to people in times of war. Their homes are often damaged or destroyed, and it's not safe to stay. So they have to leave everything they know and love. They become homeless, which means they don't have a place to call home anymore. They might have to live in temporary shelters or refugee camps. It's a really scary and unknown situation. They don't know where they will live next, how they will find food and water, or what their future will look like. The word chilling here means it's a very frightening and unsettling experience. 4. Grief and loss. Hearts shattered by the departure of loved ones, mourning in silence amidst the cacophony of conflict. Grief and loss is like a heavy weight on the heart that people feel when they lose someone they love during a war. It's as if their hearts have been broken into pieces, and they're left mourning in silence while the chaos of the conflict continues around them. Imagine someone you really love, like a family member or a close friend, is taken away from you because of the war. This can happen in many different ways, and it leaves you feeling very, very sad. The sadness is so deep that it's as if your heart has shattered, like a fragile glass vase breaking into pieces. But even in the midst of all the noise and confusion of the war, people often have to keep their grief to themselves. They can't express their sadness or sorrow because the chaos of the conflict is all around them. So they mourn, which means they express their sadness quietly and privately in their hearts. Grief and loss during a war are like the silent, heavy burden that people carry with them, even when the world around them is full of noise and turmoil. 5. Guilt and survivor's guilt, unwanted companions, whispering questions of fate and fairness to those who survived. Guilt and survivor's guilt are like unwanted companions that follow people who have lived through a traumatic event, such as a war, whispering questions about fate and fairness. Imagine you and some friends are in a very dangerous situation, like a war. Unfortunately, not all of your friends make it out safely, but you do. You might feel a heavy weight of guilt, as if you've done something wrong by surviving when others didn't. You might ask yourself, why me? Why am I still here when they're not? This is what we call survivor's guilt. Guilt in general is the feeling of responsibility for something bad that has happened. In the context of war, it's not the survivor's fault that they made it through while others didn't. But they still feel this sense of guilt. It's like they're carrying around these whispering thoughts that question why they're the ones who are still alive. These feelings can be very difficult to cope with because they often make survivors feel like they don't deserve to be alive. 6. Desensitization to violence, a coping mechanism that hardens the heart to the relentless cruelty witnessed as innocence slips away. Desensitization to violence is a way that people can adapt to the constant exposure to violence in a war. It's like a coping mechanism that helps them deal with the never-ending cruelty they see, but it can also lead to a loss of innocence. Imagine being surrounded by violence and seeing a lot of really cruel and harsh things happening all the time. At first, these things might make you very upset and emotional, but as time goes on, you might start feeling less and less emotional about them. It's like your heart becomes a bit tougher, and you don't react as strongly to the violence around you. This coping mechanism can help people survive in a very tough environment because it prevents them from feeling overwhelmed by the constant cruelty. However, the downside is that it can cause them to lose some of their innocence, which is the quality of being pure, kind, and unaffected by the harshness of the world. So desensitization to violence is a way for people to protect themselves, but it can also change them in the process. 7. Family and relationship strain. The battlegrounds of war extending into homes, fracturing bonds and testing the strength of love. Family and relationship strain is like the battles of war, extending into the places where people should feel safe and loved, their homes. It creates difficulties that can break apart the close connections between family members and test the strength of their love for each other. Imagine that a family is usually a place of happiness and love, where people care for and support each other. However, when there is a war happening, the stress, fear, and uncertainty from the outside world can seep into the family home. It's as if the war's problems become problems for the family too. This can lead to arguments and disagreements among family members. The stress of the war can make people short-tempered and anxious, and they might take out their feelings on each other. It can be really tough on relationships because the bonds that held the family together start to weaken. 8. Children and war innocence lost amid the chaos, leaving emotional scars that weave into the fabric of their future. Children and war tell a story of how childhood innocence can be taken away in the midst of conflict, leaving deep emotional scars that become a part of their future. Imagine children playing, learning, and growing in a safe and happy environment. War disrupts this idyllic picture. When children are exposed to the violence, fear, and uncertainty of war, they lose their innocence. It's like their childhood joy and carefree nature are stolen by the chaos of the conflict. The emotional scars they carry are like invisible wounds, and these experiences become part of who they are as they grow up. It shapes their outlook on the world and influences their behavior, often making them more cautious, anxious, or affected by the trauma they witnessed. In this way, the innocence lost amid the chaos weaves itself into the fabric of their future. It's a reminder of the importance of protecting children during times of conflict and providing the support and care they need to heal and grow into resilient adults. 9. Substance abuse and addiction. A desperate escape from the pain, leading some down a treacherous path of addiction. Substance abuse and addiction are like a way for some people to desperately try to escape the emotional pain they feel, which can lead them down a dangerous and challenging path of addiction. Imagine someone who has gone through the difficult experiences of war, which can leave them feeling very sad, anxious, and overwhelmed. They might look for a way to feel better, even if just for a little while. One way they might try is by using drugs or alcohol. These substances can change the way they feel temporarily. It's like a temporary escape from the emotional pain. However, if they rely on these substances too much or too often to cope with their feelings, it can lead to addiction. Addiction means they become dependent on the drugs or alcohol, and it can be very hard to stop using them. This path of addiction can be dangerous because it can create new problems and make the person's life even more challenging. To resilience and coping mechanisms, the silent heroes who rise from the ashes, displaying remarkable strength to survive and rebuild. Resilience and coping mechanisms are like the quiet heroes who emerge from the challenges and difficulties of life, demonstrating extraordinary strength to not only survive, but also rebuild their lives. Imagine someone who has faced the most challenging of situations, such as the horrors of war. Instead of giving up, they find the inner strength to carry on. It's as if they have a hidden power, like a silent hero, that helps them endure the hardships and find ways to make things better. These individuals use coping mechanisms, which are like clever strategies to deal with tough situations. For example, they might stay calm in the face of danger, support each other, or figure out how to find food and shelter, even when resources are scarce. The resilience they show is like a bright light in the darkness, inspiring hope and reminding us of the incredible strength of the human spirit. It demonstrates that even in the face of the most challenging circumstances, people can rise from the ashes, rebuild their lives, and show the world what true courage and resilience look like. 11. Stigmatization and discrimination. The harsh judgment of those who don't understand, casting shadows over those already burdened. Stigmatization and discrimination are like the unkind judgments and unfair treatment that people with certain difficulties, such as mental health issues caused by war, can face from others who don't understand their struggles. This harsh judgment can make life even more challenging for those who are already burdened. Imagine if you were going through a tough time, like dealing with the emotional scars of war, and you decided to share your feelings or seek help from others. However, instead of receiving support and understanding, some people treat you poorly or unfairly because they don't understand what you're going through. This unkind treatment, known as stigmatization, is like casting a shadow of shame or judgment over you, making you feel even worse about your situation. Discrimination is when you're treated unfairly or differently because of these issues, like mental health problems. In simpler terms, it's like having to carry the weight of judgment and unkindness on top of the difficulties you're already facing. Stigmatization and discrimination can make it harder for people to open up about their problems and get the help they need. It's important for us to be understanding and compassionate rather than judgmental when people are going through tough times. 12. Anxiety about the future. The relentless drumbeat of uncertainty, echoing long after the drums of war have gone silent. Anxiety about the future is like a constant worry and nervousness that people feel when they think about what might happen next, even after the war has ended. It's as if the uncertainty of the future keeps echoing in their minds long after the noise of the war has faded away. Imagine being in a situation where there's a lot of danger and unpredictability, like a war. Even when the war is over, the fear and uncertainty about what comes next can stay with you. It's like a never-ending drumbeat, a sound that just won't stop. This drumbeat is the sound of anxiety, which is a feeling of constant worry and nervousness about what's going to happen in the days and years to come. So even when the war has ended, people who have lived through it can still feel very anxious about the future. This anxiety echoes in their minds, reminding them of the tough times they've been through and making it hard to find peace and security. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.